So as we've just been hearing, Wayne Couzens, the serving police officer who murdered Sarah Everard in March, is due to be sentenced today.
It's also nearly 2 weeks since Sabina Nessa's body was found a few minutes' walk from her home. Public anger has followed both murders, along with debates and an outpouring of fear about the prevalence of violence against women. And we're joined now by the Victims Commissioner for England and Wales, Dame Vera Baird. Nobody could have heard some of the family's thoughts and statements yesterday and not been moved. But of course, Sarah Everard, Sabina Nessa, the other women, 76, I think, since Sarah Everard was killed, that have lost their lives, are, you know, they're not alone, are they? There's a bigger problem out there. What were your thoughts listening yesterday?
Well, first of all, I do want to express my profound sympathy for Sarah Everard's family, for their loss and for what they had to listen to yesterday. And, I mean, there are a number of things that have urgently got to be done to tackle this. The day Sabina Nessa was killed, there was a report which had been rightly commissioned by the Home Secretary, which said that there was an epidemic of violence against women and girls and that the police had improved a lot, but they hadn't done enough to bring that improvement about. There are, I think, three things we need critically to do. One is elevate the importance of violence against women and girls in policing until it is of strategic importance, like counter-terrorism, like tackling county lines, because it certainly isn't regarded like that now. Secondly, give more support and more credibility to victims of all kinds in the criminal justice system. It's urgent that the government should not, following the reshuffle, go back on its victims bill, but should bring it forward. There are, 16 to 34-year-old women, 3/4 of them have suffered street harassment. The overwhelming majority have not bothered to report because they know that they don't get support from the police and the criminal justice system. I mean, they know very well that rape is hardly prosecuted, and so what would be the point of complaining about flashing? And yet you can see how quickly something of that kind can escalate very dangerously. And that kind of brings me to the third point, which is known, needs tackling, and will take a lot longer, which is societal and cultural attitudes which critically undervalue women except as sexual objects. So an over-sexualised picture of women who are not valued as highly as men for professionalism, for the skills, for their caring, for as people. Now, this is not a criticism as all men. I mean, violent men, unfortunately, take some permission from the fact that, we don't say, stop catcalling a woman. We don't say, don't wolf whistle a woman. She isn't going to be pleased by that. She's going to feel preyed upon by you. That kind of societal attitude radically has to change. Government, probably successive governments, have to start now, whilst there is this, critical point, and they have to start working on those attitudes in a very long-term and profound way. But the police should be leading the change of attitudes and the enhancement of the importance of this. And that report, which came out the day Sabina Nessa was killed, found that they had improved, but they were not doing it. So there are ways of managing known dangerous people. The police for years have managed to target criminals, burglars, robbers, drug dealers who are let known that they're under scrutiny, who know, therefore, it's going to be difficult for them to reoffend, that they're going to be caught if they do. None of that has been done to known dangerous men dangerous to women. That report found they asked the 4 sample police services that they inspected to tell them who the 10 men most dangerous to women in their forces were, and of course directed to do it, the police did. 34 out of those 40 had never been recognised before. So known to the police, dangerous men not being managed, women not being protected against them. When protective orders are taken out, the inspectors found that in more than 2/3 of occasions, in order to keep a known dangerous person away from a woman he was targeting, in 2/3 of cases where they were breached, no action whatsoever was taken, though it would be a crime and it would be another act of persecution and predation. So we urgently need, I think, the Home Secretary, and she did a great job commissioning that report. We urgently need her to respond and make violence against women and girls part of the strategic policing requirement, which means it's better resourced, it's given more importance, people are specialist trained, there is central direction of how the police deal with it, so we can get good practice, which exists out there in policing in places, spread more widely. I mean, a very important point is how the police don't really deal with violence in their own ranks against women and girls. I think the Byline Times have produced some research this morning to show that half of the officers in the Met who've committed sexual assault of some kind, sometimes on vulnerable women. It always makes you speechless to say so. Half of them have just stayed in their jobs, and it's well known that they don't tackle domestic abuse well when it's being perpetrated by their
So are you suggesting
officers.
then...
So there is a whole need to change the police.
Yeah.
A whole need to change their attitude.
Apologies to interrupt. There's a lot to unpack in what you've just said, but are you saying that the police need to be held to account more, particularly with regard to that last point that you're making there, and actually the police are being allowed to not police themselves well enough?
Well, they certainly don't seem to do it. The evidence about domestic abuse is that when there's an allegation of it made by a partner against an officer, the reaction, and it's quite understandable as an employer, the reaction is to worry about him because his marriage is breaking up or something, and take him off serious duties and put him on something light. That's completely incompatible with supporting the person who's making the complaint and makes that person think that the police are not on her side at all. It's obvious that that inquiry about a police officer should be done by another force or a different agency and not by that force itself. But if they will not, stop this level of behaviour in their own ranks, how are we to have the confidence that they will respond if we speak about violence against women and girls, street harassment, and those things which look low level, which they don't take seriously enough, which could quickly escalate into becoming extremely dangerous? I hope that the Home Secretary does, she's been strong about this, I hope she does elevate the status of it and drives through the College of Policing and so on, police to take much, much, much more notice of what female victims are saying their safety worries are. That societal issue is also a very, very major one, which governments need to start now. And please, the Victims Bill is absolutely urgent. Victims can't be ignored any longer. OK, we're going to have to leave it there, but we thank you for joining us. That's the Commissioner of England and Wales, the Victims Commissioner, Dame Vera Baird. Thanks for joining us.